Lance Lynn to the Dodgers, Jordan Montgomery to the Rangers, trades, and more trades. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Monday, July 31st. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White and Chris Towers. Today on the show, we are going to break down a whole bunch of trades, big injury news to get you caught up on, waiver wire moves, and much more. How was everybody's weekend? Chris, your Marlins went out and they got a new closer. It's fun.
Yeah, they still need like several hitters and probably another starter, but yeah, it's a start. They won a series for the first time in 3 weeks.
Let's go.
All it took was Detroit coming into town, but it was cool because like they did Venezuelan Heritage Night on Saturday, and Miguel Cabrera was in town. He's Venezuelan, obviously, probably the greatest Venezuelan baseball player of all time. Am I missing anyone? And my wife's family's from Venezuela, so they all went on Saturday, and it was really cool to see the ovation for him. It was one of the biggest crowds of the year, so that was neat.
Nice. Yeah, good stuff. I know that you said the Marlins have a bunch of other needs, and the latest rumor that we're hearing is that they want Gleyber Torres from the Yankees. So,
well, that was within minutes from trading for him last year. Remember, I think it was it Pablo Lopez?
I think it was. I think that was going to be the trade. Yeah,
that was supposed to be the trade. Yeah, that was. So I don't know. Whatever. He'd be an upgrade over, Joey Wendell or whatever. So that's fine.
Let's see, man. I mean, look, there's
the one thing the Marlins need is more second basemen. So that works.
Yeah,
they've only got like 12 on the roster.
Yeah, I think I read that Luis Arraez would slide over to first baseman. So soon they'll have a team of second basemen just playing everywhere, all over the field. The Miami Marlins. Lots of trades this weekend, and I'm sure we're going to get a few more here leading up to the trade deadline on Tuesday. By the way, we will have a live trade deadline special live stream podcast that will be on here at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time here on YouTube. So if you want to come hang out, we'll be talking about everything that happens on Tuesday. And then we'll have a regular podcast that night as well. Let's get into trades from this weekend. We did do a separate podcast on Max Scherzer earlier in the day, so be sure to check that out if you haven't already. The White Sox were very busy. First up, they traded Lance Lynn and Joe Kelly for Trace Thompson and two minor leaguers, Nick Nastrini and Jordan Leisure. And Lance Lynn, we've talked about him all season long. He has the highest ERA among qualified starting pitchers at 6.47. He also ranks 11th in all of baseball with 144 strikeouts. The Dodgers have possessed this magic touch at times, and Dodger Stadium actually has the second highest home run park factor in all of baseball behind only Great American Ballpark. So there's a little bit of give and take here. Scott, we'll start with you. Obviously, the ballpark, it seems like that wouldn't be a good landing spot for Lance Lynn. He's given up home runs this year, but it's the Dodgers, and he gets good run support, and they usually kind of figure these things out. Your thoughts on Lance Lynn sliding over to Los Angeles?
Yeah, Lance Lynn's issues are way beyond ballpark. So if things are going to turn around for him, I don't know that any park was going to do it. I mean, it's more if there was any player who could use his change of scenery, it's Lance Lynn. And if there's any better organization for him, if there was any organization for him to join, it's the Dodgers. So it doesn't mean it'll work out. I mean, there were cases made for Noah Syndergaard this off season that obviously didn't come true. It's not like anybody who joins the Dodgers is automatically better, but they do have a history of bringing out the best in players, and there's still a lot underneath the hood with Lance Lynn to be encouraged about. Has a career best swinging strike rate. His strikeout percentage, I know you said he's 11th in strikeouts. His actual strikeout rate, as in strikeouts per inning.
Per plate appearance.
Thank you. At the time of the trade, it was 15th among qualifiers. So like he's been great at missing bats, and there's no skill better than missing bats. And so it doesn't look like a clear-cut case to me of a 36-year-old just becoming old. So that's why there's reason to reserve some hope. He's still 80% rostered in CBS Sports Leagues. So people have surprisingly, I mean, for all the complaints out there, people have surprisingly held on to Lance Lynn throughout his struggles. And we should know within 2 or 3 starts if things are going to go differently for him with the Dodgers. I think it's worth holding on a little longer to see.
And he's got a pretty great matchup in his first Dodgers start this Tuesday going up against the Oakland A's. So I'm not saying you throw him out there, but, if he has a good start, maybe we'll gain some confidence there in Lance Lynn.
I will say there's an obvious problem for Lance Lynn. And I don't know if you guys talked about this when he made his last start, but he's been historically bad against left-handed batters this year. He has a 652 OPS allowed against righties. That's very good. Against lefties, it's 1037. 1,037 OPS. He has given up 18 of his 28 home runs to left-handed batters. And the problem is, maybe he just throws the changeup more, right? And that helps because that's typically, maybe changeup and cutter. He can just, those have been his best pitches against lefties. Maybe he can figure something out. And, if the Dodgers, I don't think it's unfair to say the Dodgers are better at figuring that kind of stuff out than the White Sox. So, if there is a change to be made, I have more faith in them figuring it out than the White Sox. But that does feel like, there are still, like Scott said, there are positives under the hood, but that does feel like something's been figured out, like something's broken that may not be fixable.
Well, I mean, it might just be a simple matter of pitch selection, like you said.
Yeah.
And I think it's fair to say the Dodgers wouldn't have traded for Lance Lynn if they thought he was going to pitch to a 6.50 ERA the rest of the way. Like, that just seems like you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're doing that.
It's just, for our purposes, they might be happy with a 4.50 ERA given what they've gotten from a lot of their rotation.
Yeah.
We wouldn't be.
Sure. That's fair.
Yeah. The prospects received in this deal, as I mentioned, the White Sox got Nick Nastrini, who is a 23-year-old pitcher, big fastball and slider. Apparently has a ton of upside, but struggles with control. And then Leisure, a 24-year-old pitcher, has a fastball in the high 90s, also struggles with control. Scott, anything to see here with these prospects, Nick Nastrini and Jordan Leisure going over to the White Sox?
I mean, Nastrini was one of a dozen arms in the Dodgers organization that has interesting strikeout numbers. The fact that they were willing to part with him rather than some of the others, I don't know if that says something. But I wouldn't call him like a high-end dynasty target or anything like that.
Leisure, you read the scouting reports, it sounds like he just doesn't take things seriously enough.
All right, let's move over. Chris just banned himself from the podcast after that. He's like, I'll just see myself out. Let's stick with the White Sox. They traded away Kendall Graveman to the Houston Astros in exchange for catcher Corey Lee. We'll get into Corey Lee in just a second. Chris, I think the biggest takeaway here from a fantasy perspective is what happens at the back end of the White Sox bullpen. I don't know that they're going to win many games here down the stretch, but in deeper leagues where we're desperate for saves, it looks like Gregory Santos is the name that's going to step in here. He picked up a save on Friday, at least until Liam Hendricks returns. If Liam Hendricks returns, maybe he's traded. Maybe they just kind of shut him down for the rest of the season. Your thoughts on the back end of the White Sox bullpen?
Yeah, I think it'll be Santos, and I would assume this is not the last trade that the White Sox are going to make, so there could be even less competition there. And he's a pretty, in some ways, a pretty traditionally 2023 reliever. It's fastball, slider 50% of the time, basically. Slider's a pretty good swing and miss pitch. I don't think he's a superstar. You look at the strikeout numbers, and they're a little bit better than average right now. But yeah, I'd rather have him than Trevor May. So, for whatever that's worth.
Gregory Santos, 10% rostered, so widely available. Again, if you play in those deeper category leagues and you're looking for saves, he is the name that you should be looking at in the White Sox bullpen. As I mentioned, the White Sox received Corey Lee in return, a 25-year-old catcher, former first-round pick from back in 2019. Hit for a solid batting average in the minors this year, but not much pop. He's known mostly for his elite throwing arm than anything. Chris, anything here on Corey Lee? That's now 2 catcher prospects in the past week for the White Sox.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a little bit of athleticism, 24 steals in 181 games at AAA as well, and hit for power in AAA, although, it's the PCL, so I don't think you take too much from that. I think it's unlikely he's ever more than a low-end number 2 catcher.
Fair enough. Yeah, we'll see if he kind of works in this year. Again, he's already 25 years old. they have Yasmani Grandal, but they probably want to see what they have in some of these young players as well.
I would still think there's a decent chance Grandal gets traded too.
Yep. Let's slide over to the Cardinals, who are also very busy this weekend. They traded Jordan Montgomery and Chris Stratton to the Texas Rangers. The Rangers needed some pitching. They got Scherzer. Unfortunately, Nathan Eovaldi went on the IL. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. In return, the Cardinals received Thomas Saggese, who is a name Scott and I recently talked about on Fantasy Baseball Today in 5, a right-handed pitcher, Takoa Roby, and a left-handed reliever, John King. Jordan Montgomery, he's been solid this year, 3.42 ERA, 125 whip. It is a negative park shift going from the Cardinals to the Rangers, but obviously big upgrade in terms of run support. Scott, any takes here on Jordan Montgomery, who will be available in AL-only leagues now?
Yeah, he will. And if you did listen to the emergency pod about Max Scherzer, I pointed out that even though he was going to a better team with the best offense in baseball, we probably weren't going to see much change with the win-loss record because he managed to go 9-4 for the Mets. Opposite story for Jordan Montgomery. He's 6-9 so far with the bad Cardinals team. And that's even though he's been going consistently 6+ innings, more consistently than we've seen him do that in the past. I believe it's 8 of his last 9 starts. He's gone 6 innings or more, if I remember what I wrote earlier today. So it seems like an upgrade for him, just getting with a better supporting cast. He's long been a good but not great pitcher, and that's the sort that can be elevated most by their supporting cast. So, I doubt he's available, Jordan Montgomery, in any leagues, but hopefully you get more wins out of him moving forward. I am interested to see what happens with the Rangers rotation with these 2 moves. Nathan Eovaldi did go on the IL with a forearm issue, but they're also saying they think it's going to be a minimum stay. So he misses 2, maybe 3 turns. And even apart from that, they have to kick somebody out just to get the 2 arms in. So I'm guessing Dane Dunning goes to the bullpen. He's kind of slowed down anyway. He has some experience in relief. He had been a borderline usable fantasy option at times. And then beyond him, presuming everybody's healthy at the same time when Eovaldi gets back, Martin Perez may not be long for the rotation either. That would be my guess.
Yeah, Perez and even Andrew Heaney, they both haven't pitched very well this year. So I think one of those 2 lefties will probably get the boot when Nathan Eovaldi comes back. They're talking like it's going to be a minimum stay, but forearm injuries, they could be pretty tricky.
Yeah, especially with the way that's just gotten worse and worse. It was, we're just skipping a start. Now, yeah.
It seems weird that they're so optimistic, yet they're making all these trades for starting pitching. In my mind, I feel like they're pretty worried about Nathan Eovaldi.
Well, the rotation wasn't very good behind.
Yeah,
Eovaldi.
Martin Perez has been kind of a disaster.
Even John Gray hasn't been very good. So, no, I don't know. I kind of read the Eovaldi thing as let's just give him a rest more than he has an injury. Like one of those phantom IL things. But I could be wrong about that.
Scott, anything here on the return? I know Thomas Saggese is a name that you've highlighted on FBT and 5. He was performing well in the minors this year. 21 years old, 313 batting average, 15 homers, 8 steals, and an 891 OPS. I don't think we'll see him this year, but potentially next year with the Cardinals.
Yeah, and his numbers have been getting better and better all year. I'm a little surprised they haven't moved him up to AAA yet. But now that's the Cardinals' decision to make, and I don't think he has a particularly high ceiling. He hasn't shown up on any top 100 list that I've seen. But I do get kind of like a Spencer Steer vibe from him, and Steer has obviously turned himself into a quality fantasy player. The Rangers, because they have Corey Seager and Marcus Semien locked up long-term, it's kind of the worst organization to be an up-and-coming middle infielder. Cardinals, they're kind of crowded there as well, but doesn't get worse than the Rangers. So I think Saggese, excuse me. Is it Saggese or Saggese?
I think it's Saggese when I looked it up.
Okay. Baseball Reference isn't always right, but they say Saggese. we'll see. He's probably not going to make an impact this year, but maybe he has a future as kind of a bat first super utility player.
All right, let's stick with the Cardinals. Jordan Hicks was traded to the Toronto Blue Jays on Sunday, and this comes, just a day after, or a couple days after Jordan Romano placed on the IL with back inflammation. Originally I thought it was going to be one of Eric Swanson or maybe Jimmy Garcia or Tim Meza. It sounds like they were going to maybe go with a committee approach. Chris, I don't know if they trade for Jordan Hicks and throw him right into the closer role. Maybe if Jordan Romano misses extended time, he can kind of work his way into it. I could be wrong, though. What's your take on the Blue Jays bullpen while Jordan Romano is out?
Yeah, I'd bet on him being Hicks being the closer, excuse me. Moving forward, at least as long as Romano's out, he's had experience in that role. He's had success in that role. I think they'd probably just throw him in there. That's my guess anyway.
I stashed Eric Swanson away for weeks in some of these 15-team roto leagues. Finally looks like he gets his opening, and then the Blue Jays go and do this. Unfortunate.
Well, let's hope that Chris is wrong, Scott, and that I was right.
Well, no, I would guess that as well. What's funny about Jordan Hicks, though, and this is why I was kind of surprised the Cardinals went to him instead of Giovanni Gallegos. Not that Gallegos has pitched well since that happened, but like Jordan Hicks has for a long time gotten this buzz about, he could be a dominant closer because he peaks at 103 miles per hour with his fastball. His numbers for really his whole career and this year are just not that dominant. I think he has a whip over 1.5 this year.
Yeah, 5.2 walks per 9.
So I didn't drop Swanson in any of those leagues where I picked him up. And again, I'll stress these are 15-team leagues. These are not these are not decisions the average fantasy player has to make. But I would guess it's Hicks.
How about this? In my most important 15-team league, Roto, my two closers were Jordan Romano and AJ Puck. I now have 0 closers. I picked up Eric Swanson. We'll see where it goes. I picked up Mason Thompson, hoping that Kyle Finnegan gets traded. It's a disaster.
I've got
nobody.
One league where I only had Romano, and I've been trying to figure it out. And now I'm choosing between Trevor May with 5 games this week or Eric Swanson with 7. It doesn't feel good.
Yeah, and Trevor May is a name that could get moved as well. So we'll see what happens there. The Cardinals, I mentioned they traded away Jordan Hicks. That means someone is likely going to have to close in the interim, at least until Ryan Helsley is able to return to the team. On Sunday, Giovanni Gallegos pitched 2 perfect innings with a 3-run lead. However, it was in the 7th and the 8th innings, and it was a gentleman named Jojo Romero who got the 9th inning and struck out 2 for his first save. He's only 1% rostered. Scott, how do you see the Cardinals bullpen kind of shaking out until Ryan Helsley comes back, and then I guess even after Ryan Helsley comes back?
I think it's going to be a committee. It's hard for me to see Jojo Romero just being a closer for 2 weeks or however long it takes Helsley to come back. And so maybe Gallegos will factor in there as well. Maybe others will. If I'm forced to pick up one Cardinals reliever, I'm picking up Gallegos. But that's not with a high degree of confidence or a high amount of fab dollars. And if you want, if you play in a deep league where everybody who gets saves are scarce, maybe you throw $1 or $2 at Romero as well, just in case.
We saw the trade chips start to fall last week when the Angels announced that they were buyers instead of selling Shohei Ohtani. They made another move on Sunday. They acquired CJ Cron and Randall Grichuk for 2 minor league pitchers, Jake Madden and Mason Albright. And obviously, leaving Coors Field, this is pretty bad news for CJ Cron and Randall Grichuk. Trying to figure out where everyone's going to play. Once Mike Trout returns, they'll still have Mickey Moniak. They'll have Randall Grichuk. Chris, I think this is a pretty obvious downgrade for both CJ Cron and Randall Grichuk.
Yeah, the other thing that precipitated this trade was Taylor Ward. His season's likely over. He was added to the 60-day IL after being hit in the face with a pitch. Hopefully he'll be okay. But yeah, his season's basically over. So that's why they went and got Cron in particular. I do think we've seen Grichuk be useful outside of Coors Field. We've seen Cron be useful outside of Coors Field as well. So I don't think it totally buries their production, but it's going to be it was pretty fringe in both cases already. So it certainly doesn't help. You know, the thing to keep in mind when you're talking about players leaving Coors Field, and we saw this with Nolan Arenado, right? Nolan Arenado has probably been a little worse his last couple of seasons than his last couple of seasons in Coors, although he had the one really bad one in 2020, albeit very small. But, you know, he's still been a must-start player. You're going to see a downgrade, but don't just look at the home road splits when it comes to CJ Cron and Randall Grichuk and conclude that they'll be completely useless because their road splits are bad, because we do know about the Coors hangover effect. Guys tend to play worse than their baseline talent level, specifically the first series away from Coors. But really, Coors guys' road numbers tend to be exaggerated across the board. So I don't think Cron or Grichuk are going to be particularly useful, but I'm not necessarily dropping Cron immediately.
I think it depends what sort of league you're in. Because,
sure,
you know, a corner infielder league, okay, maybe not. But if you don't have a corner infield spot, I think CJ Cron is going to have a very difficult time rising to the level of relevance in that league. Yeah, because, you know, we saw him.
He already kind of was.
Yeah, true. Fair enough. He was about 80% rostered, which I think was fine. He had hit well since coming off the IL. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, he's what got him to that level in fantasy in the first place was going to Coors Field. We'd seen him for several years before then. He put up pretty good power numbers, but that's about it. The other thing aside from the obvious, they're leaving Coors Field now for these two, is they're both like low OBP guys that the Angels aren't going to be as committed to playing them, I think, as the Rockies will. And when Mike Trout comes back, Grichuk's probably the lesser half of a platoon with Mickey Moniak. You got Brandon Drury coming off the IL pretty soon. How much is that going to cut into Cron's playing time? Hard to say, but it's really bad news for both of these players.
All right. The Braves, they made a massive trade on Sunday, Scott. They traded away Taylor Hearn in exchange for Nicky Lopez, who will likely be a bench utility bat.
Wow, Hearn just got there.
Well, yeah, that's the weird thing about this trade from it doesn't matter. It's Taylor Hearn for Nicky Lopez. Who cares? But Taylor Hearn was just available a week ago. They could have just gotten him for nothing.
That's like when somebody makes a trade in your fantasy league and you're like, I could have beaten that if I had only known he was available. That's what
I tend to if someone offers me a player that they just picked up, just kind of out of principle, I tend to turn it down.
Yeah, that's how I was looking at it.
I saw the transaction log. I know Taylor Hearn was available a week ago. I'm not trading for him.
Yeah. Well, I hadn't heard it was. I saw the Braves got Nicky Lopez. I hadn't heard Hearn was the one going the other way. I thought he had some untapped upside. Pretty sure Nicky Lopez doesn't. Whatever. Yeah. They're both useless in fantasy.
Some quick fallout from the David Robertson trade to the Marlins that we found out about late on Thursday night. The Mets apparently will not name a closer. Adam Ottavino and other options are, quote, on the table. However, Brooks Raley converted the save on Thursday night, and then he did the same thing on Sunday. Adam Ottavino pitched in the 8th inning with a 3-run lead, and then Brooks Raley got the 9th. He walked 1 but struck out 3 for his 3rd save. And he's currently 15% rostered. Chris, you're just getting all the bullpen questions tonight. I don't know why. It just kind of worked out that way. Do you think Brooks Raley will be the leader, I guess, for Mets saves going forward?
At this point, I think you kind of have to assume that given the way that they've used them. But that's also assuming he doesn't get traded in the next 48 hours, which are probably 40 hours at this point, which is not necessarily a safe assumption. I think anyone who doesn't have long-term appeal for the Mets is a trade candidate, including Justin Verlander.
Yeah.
Who will probably not be the closer, just to be clear.
Because Ottavino isn't signed for next year, I imagine between him and Raley, Ottavino is the more likely of the two to be traded, which is, I kind of thought why they didn't want to name a closer, because they'll name Ottavino and they just trade him and have to name another one. But yeah, I mean, they've been using Raley anyway, so maybe it doesn't matter. Also, on the subject of Verlander being traded, who else is an obvious candidate at this point that's left. There, Michael Lorenzen, I guess, because his contract expires after the year. And there's been some talk of maybe the Tigers moving Eduardo Rodriguez too, though he's signed for several more years. Padres, we haven't really seen them get involved yet. I think they'd more likely be sellers than buyers, but maybe not. I'm just kind of wondering what kind of day we're in for Tuesday, because it feels like the trades have been kind of spread out instead of everybody waiting till the last minute.
I mean, Jeimer Candelario and Lane Thomas from Washington, Tommy Pham, Jack Flaherty I just saw he was taken off the probable starters list on Tuesday. So Eduardo Rodriguez, he's got a sub-3 ERA. Yeah, there's a few guys left, but
that could. Yeah, but I mean, Lane Thomas is under team control through 2025, so they wouldn't have to trade him.
Yeah, there was the quote that like they would move him if somebody else views him as an all-star.
Yeah.
Which, okay.
Yeah. And we've already heard Cody Bellinger isn't getting traded. They could always change their mind, I guess, but that's what they've said. Shohei Ohtani isn't getting traded, obviously. So I don't know. I mean,
there are a few, like Paul Sewald.
Yeah,
has been mentioned in some rumors that would be really interesting. Josh Hader, obviously, that's one that is different than trading Juan Soto or Blake Snell.
And like Hader and Snell are both free agents after the year. So if the Padres are deciding they're out, they should trade them. But they're the kind of player, they're the caliber of player they could commit a qualifying offer to. So obviously they have to feel like the return they're getting back is worth more than the draft pick, and also the perception that they're cashing out for 2023. So it's a bit more complicated than it seems.
I just have to think if Ryan Helsley was healthy, Giovanni Gallegos would get traded. I don't know how that'll work now, but I still think there's a decent chance that happens.
But it's mostly like bit players we're talking about.
Yeah.
For that Padres duo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I could be wrong. I'm not rooting against a wild Tuesday, but it was pretty wild the last 2 years, right? And I'm just not as confident we're going to get that this year.
Yeah, I don't think that we have some kind of Juan Soto-esque player unless it's Juan Soto himself, but I don't think that's happening either. The White Sox, maybe Tim Anderson, Liam Hendricks, something like that, but we'll see. Tuesday, a couple days away, the trade deadline at 6 p.m. We will find out around
some poorly timed injuries also. Like Shane Bieber could have gotten traded if he hadn't gotten hurt, and
Jonathan India.
Jonathan India is the other one that, if he wasn't added to the IL this week, I think there's a decent chance he would have gotten moved.
All right, let's take our first break. When we return, we'll talk about some big injury news, and then we'll get into the rest of this weekend's action right after this.
You up for playing outside the lines?
What are her directives then?
Neutralize the target.
You do it quiet, and you do it clean.
If your cover is blown, you have to save yourself.
Did you hit the target?
I'm doing everything different this time. She's your field agent. Do what you think's best.
Welcome back, and a quick reminder to join our Fantasy Baseball Today Facebook group. It's free, facebook.com/groups/Fantasy Baseball Today, or just go on Facebook and search up Fantasy Baseball Today. That'll pop up in your groups. You can join, ask questions, keeper league questions, dynasty, trades, waiver wire questions, and interact with other fans of the podcast. Again, we will have a trade deadline live special Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. So if you are around, maybe you're just finishing up work, you want to come hang out, see what's going on with the trades, feel free to do that. And I usually start each podcast asking our listeners to leave a 5-star rating if you enjoy the podcast. We do appreciate everybody who has done that in the past. I noticed 2 unsatisfactory reviews this weekend, which is fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But we got a 3-star review for saying glob too much. So take that, Scott. The glob father.
I guess I picked the wrong word to call that giant mass of pitchers that are indistinguishable from each other. I don't know. I mean, he could have said we say exit velocity too much, or fastball, or pitcher. But, we keep saying those words and nobody seems to mind. It's just glob's the one they don't like.
Glob.
Yep. They're not about it. And also a 2-star rating because I too enthusiastically say double dongs or just dongs on the podcast. So I do apologize, but look, guys, we're just trying to have some fun out here. And it actually does matter.
I mean, it is an actual descriptive word that's meant to help us contextualize the starting pitcher positions and those who occupy it.
Man, those people would have been really upset if, like, during the height of the peak ball era, we just referred to like the dong glob.
Oh gosh. But for those who actually enjoy the podcast, feel free to help us out. Give us a 5-star rating. We do appreciate it. And for those who don't, we apologize. All right, let's get into the big injury news from the weekend. We mentioned already Nathan Eovaldi went to the IL with a forearm strain, and I've expressed concern for quite some time now. I think we all have. He was the SP4 overall in both roto and head-to-head points before landing on the IL. Obviously, a big loss for fantasy. Bruce Bochy said on Sunday he expects Nathan Eovaldi to return on August 11th when first eligible. We shall see. And we will talk about waiver wire pitchers in just a bit. Maybe some replacements there for Nathan Eovaldi. More hits for the Rangers as Jonah Heim went to the IL with a left wrist tendon strain, retroactive to July 27th. Currently the number 1 catcher in roto, the number 2 catcher in head-to-head points, batting .280 with 14 home runs and an absurd 70 RPI from the catcher position this season. If you are looking for replacements, Keibert Ruiz has hit pretty well in the month of July, 54% rostered. It's got 2 other names I thought about. You tell me. Maybe I'm off base here. The Padres have the 4th best hitter matchups this week, according to your Sleeper Hitters article. They have 3 games in Coors Field. And I think maybe rolling the dice on Luis Campusano or Gary Sanchez could work this week. Could.
I mean, Gary Sanchez just had a double dong here Sunday.
Yes, God, yes. Embrace it.
I mean, listen, we can't react to every isolated negative review we get. Have you ever read Amazon reviews before? People will give something a 1-star review because the box showed up dented. It's like, what does that have to do with the product?
Scott, if I read every negative review, we'd have some really long podcasts here. I just thought those were a little out there, so I guess I just wanted to bring them up and bring some
double dong, baby.
Yeah, let's go. Jonathan India was placed on the IL with plantar fasciitis in his left foot. The hope is that he'll only miss the minimum time as well. Some replacements for this week. Edouard Julien has 6 games. We know he's been hitting well. He's currently slated to face 4 right-handed pitchers and 2 TBDs. Hopefully they aren't lefties. Wilmer Flores is on Scott's sleeper hitters list this week. And Jake Berger recently gained second base eligibility. He's been hitting some home runs recently. He's got the crazy home road splits, though. That's the only problem. 6 road games this week. He's been much better at home. Chris, how would you rank those 3 potential India replacements? Edouard Julien, Wilmer Flores, and Jake Berger.
I'd probably lean towards Julien. I think there are some concerns about how much playing time he's going to get, but that's become less of a concern lately. Sort of similar to Jake Berger. I just have a little more faith in Julian's profile.
All right. Well, I don't think we've ever done this. Maybe one time. But I think we have to skip, oh my goodness gracious, today because there's just too much. We'll get to these names a little bit later on. But I do want to get into waiver wire pitchers and hitters, and feel like that is more important at this point. So let's get into the waiver wire pitchers.
In the notes even.
What?
You said you had my guy not even in the notes.
I'll bring him up. Okay. I'll make sure you have an opportunity to talk about Bailey Ober, Scott. I promise you. Waiver wire pitchers, part 1. Again, we're looking for some Nathan Eovaldi replacements. Braxton Garrett got back on track Friday, but it was against the Tigers. So maybe you take it with a grain of salt. 6 innings, 1 unearned run with 6 strikeouts there. His velocity was up across the board. I thought that was pretty encouraging for Braxton Garrett. Kyle Hendricks, another quality start. He was at the Cardinals on Sunday. 7 innings, 3 runs, 2 strikeouts for him. And Steven Matz continues to pitch well. Over his last 5 starts, he has a 1.69 ERA and just over a strikeout per inning. Scott, how would you rank those 3? Steven Matz, Kyle Hendricks, and Braxton Garrett.
I guess I'll stick with Garrett number 1, though I'm surprised his roster rate is as high as it is with as poorly as he's pitched recently. Hendricks 2, Matz 3.
All right, let's get into our waiver wire pitchers part 2 on this list. If I could find them, here they are. Emmett Sheehan put together a solid start up against the Reds. 5 shutout innings with 5 strikeouts for him. Christopher Sanchez through 5 no-hit innings with 3 strikeouts at the Pirates. Graham Ashcraft continues to pitch well. He was at the Dodgers on Sunday. He threw 6 shutout innings with 2 strikeouts. No Mookie Betts in the lineup, but over the last 6 starts for Graham Ashcraft, he has a 1.75 ERA and a 1.19 whip. Chris, any interest in Emmett Sheehan, Christopher Sanchez, and Graham Ashcraft?
Yeah, I have interest in Sheehan. Obviously, given his youth and the potential for upside there. I think Sanchez is moderately interesting in a preferably a ground ball innings eater type of role, although 5 no-hit innings today and pulled after 73 pitches. I'm not sure what was up with that. But he's been really interesting this season because he's kept that that walk rate super, super low. He's not going to get a lot of strikeouts, but he's consistently had the walk rate in like the 2 and under range per 9. And if he can sustain that, given how many ground balls he gets, I do think Sanchez can be an above average pitcher. Ashcraft, I don't think it makes any sense. I can't see anything that he's really doing all that differently than when he was doing poorly. I think this is just a situation where he might just be the ultimate random number generator because his stuff is so good. And when it's on point, things tend to happen that are good. But on the whole, he still doesn't get any strikeouts. He still gives up a lot of walks. I don't really have any faith in Graham Ashcraft moving forward.
I did add Christopher Sanchez to the sleeper pitchers for this week because his next start is against the Royals. I'm skeptical he can keep the walks down, and that's going to be the key to everything. But I agree with Chris that the ground ball rate is high enough that if he does, then there may be something here.
It's a massive outlier for his career. Like his minor league numbers, he was like a bad control guy.
Yeah.
And then this year in the majors, he's been an elite control guy. Don't really know how sustainable it is, but like you said, and like I said, if he can't sustain it, it should be pretty good.
2.66 ERA, 0.91 whip so far.
Yep. 359 xFIP.
For Christopher Sanchez, who is 41% rostered, good matchup this week, and he is a spark. So if you're playing a points league, you could throw him in a relief pitcher spot. I would say of the 2 groups so far, Christopher Sanchez and Steven Matz, I think, have the 2 best matchups this week. Steven Matz facing the Rockies in St. Louis later on this week. Waiver wire pitchers part 3. Brady Singer racked up the whiffs up against the Minnesota Twins, though many starting pitchers rack up whiffs against that team. Over Singer's last 6 starts, he has a 3.65 ERA and a 1.24 whip. Cutter Crawford had a strong start at the Giants, 5 2/3 innings, 1 run, 7 strikeouts with 14 swinging strikes. And Jameson Taillon has turned in 4 solid starts in a row during that stretch, 1.78 ERA and a 0.99 whip. Scott, I don't know that there is much upside or excitement with this group, but you see anything here with Brady Singer, Cutter Crawford, Jameson Taillon?
I remain intrigued by Crawford. He gets whiffs at a really nice rate, and 2 of his last 3 starts have been, I think, the best he's had all season, right? With a really bad one in between. So it's more just I'm intrigued by this guy and enjoy seeing his stat line, enjoy looking up his stat line after every start versus I want this guy in my lineup. But there is a 15-team league where I've struggled to get to fill out my pitching staff, basically, because in 15-team leagues, there are no good starting pitchers on waivers. And I've had to mix in Cutter Crawford a little in that deeper format.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. He's at the Mariners this week, too, who are 20th in WOBA against right-handed pitching. 2 names in deeper leagues. Luis Medina, kind of pitching well over his last 4 starts. 2.86 ERA, 1.05 whip, 27 strikeouts over 22 innings, and he has 13 or more swinging strikes in each of his last 4 starts. He had 16 swinging strikes Sunday at Coors Field. Ryan Yarbrough has sneakily pitched well recently. Also, he's went up against the Twins this weekend. 7 innings, 1 run, 5 strikeouts for him with 12 swinging strikes on 78 pitches. Chris, we're talking again 15-team league, super desperate for pitching. But anything here with Luis Medina and Ryan Yarbrough? They're kind of polar opposites.
Yeah, I mean, Medina's got some interesting things going on. The slider whiff rate is over 50% for the season, or it was before today when he had 12 swings and misses on the slider. So that's really good. And the curveball has been a pretty decent pitch for him. You know, his fastball tends to get hit pretty hard. He doesn't generate a lot of whiffs with it, despite it being a 96-mile-per-hour pitch. But yeah, I think Medina's worth a look in deeper leagues. I'm not sure even in a 15-team league that I'd want to start him right now, but there's some interesting things going on for sure.
Two names that we might be able to drop, probably should. Let's see. Tyler Wells was optioned back to Double-A after another disappointing outing on Saturday against the Yankees. He had an 11 ERA in 3 starts after the All-Star break, and I know that innings were a concern for Tyler Wells also. He's still 89% rostered. And Luis Severino, if you were holding on to any hope, Sunday Night Baseball, blown up, destroyed, 9 earned runs. His ERA now stands at 7.49 on the year. Scott, are you okay dropping either Tyler Wells or Luis Severino at this point?
I have an easier time dropping Severino. I mean, Wells had been pretty solid before those last 3 starts, and I mentioned him among my 15 pitchers who were coming up on innings issues, and I mean, the Orioles kind of laid out the plan for him. They're just going to shut him down for a while and then build him back up again, like the Marlins appear to be doing with
Yuri Perez.
Thank you. And they said they need him down the stretch. He's arguably been their ace this year, right? Do they have a better pitcher? I guess Kyle Bradish has pitched well.
He's got like the second lowest whip in baseball, which is
So they do need him. I mean, if they're going to go anywhere, I think it's just keeping the innings from getting too high, and within a couple weeks, we'll see him again. I don't know. I mean, it depends how much roster space you have, but it wouldn't surprise me if you did drop him that we're all picking him up again later on.
All right. Well, let's hit the news and notes, and then we'll get to a break. Got some waiver wire hitters we'll get to in just a little bit as well. But more news items from this weekend. Aaron Judge made his return on Friday. He homered on Saturday. Oswald Peraza was optioned back to the minors. Corey Seager received a cortisone injection in his sprained right thumb on Friday and could start swinging a bat within the next couple days. MRI results on Juan Soto's right middle finger showed progress compared to the scan he had done back in January. Apparently, he's been playing through this dating back to spring training, which we just found out last week. Mookie Betts has missed 2 straight due to right ankle soreness. We haven't heard much about the injury, though it seems like he is day-to-day. Let's see what happens, on Monday here. Let's see. Are the Dodgers playing on Monday? They are not playing on Monday, so we'll have to wait until Tuesday to find out about Mookie Betts. Clayton Kershaw worked 3 innings in a simulated game on Saturday, depending on how he feels in the coming days. Could be activated as soon as next week. Jazz Chisholm began a rehab assignment at Single A on Sunday. He has been out since July 3rd with a left oblique strain. Cedric Mullins appears on course to return in early August. He's been out for the past few weeks with a right adductor strain. Brandon Woodruff confirmed that he'll make his next rehab start Tuesday at AAA. And if all goes well, that could be his final rehab outing before rejoining the Brewers' rotation. Zach Eflin said he is, quote, good to go for his scheduled start against the Yankees on Tuesday. He left his previous outing with a knee issue.
That's one that, I would love to start him against that matchup because even with Aaron Judge back, I still think that's probably going to be a pretty good matchup. But given the injury and the way the last start went, I think I'd probably avoid Eflin.
I should mention that, if it's a borderline case like that, Zach Eflin against the Yankees coming back from injury, as we talked about on Friday, the 2-start pitcher slate for this week is ridiculous in terms of the number of usable pitchers who are making 2 starts, including several who are probably available in your league. And so, it might be a time to be a little extra discriminate with those choices. Of course, the trade deadline is coming up, and we still don't know how much of that will be blown up. But even with all the trades we saw over the weekend, I made very few changes to those 2-start pitcher rankings. They stayed mostly intact for now.
All right. Chris Sale will begin a rehab assignment at AAA Tuesday. He's been out since early June with a stress reaction in his left scapula. Dodgers catcher Will Smith left Sunday after getting hit by a pitch on his left elbow. X-rays came back negative. Ha-Sung Kim, who has been on fire, left Sunday with a jammed right shoulder and is considered day-to-day. So pay attention Monday for that. JD Martinez exited Sunday with that recurring hamstring injury. He'll undergo an MRI. Nestor Cortez.
That one sounds like it might be an IL stint.
Yeah, this is something that's feels like consistently been kind of hampering JD Martinez over the past few weeks. Nestor Cortez is set to make one final rehab start Wednesday before rejoining the Yankees. It sounds like Trevor Story could be activated this Friday when the Red Sox begin a homestand against the Blue Jays. Obviously, very important matchup there in the AL East. Story is up to 70% rostered, but still could be out there in some shallower leagues. Brandon Drury is targeting a return on Thursday. He was batting .277 with 14 home runs before getting hurt. He is 71% rostered. Scott, who would you rather have moving forward, Drury or Trevor Story?
Story, easily. More upside, and I think the playing time's more trustworthy with given all the pieces the Angels have added that are very Drury-like at the plate. Yep. Sounds funny. Makes it sound like they're bad and boring, which is kind of what Drury is like. They're Drury-like and they're dreary-like and Drury-like.
Drury might be boring, but he's been pretty good this year, Scott, and want to give him his credit.
Good in the boring way, where 260 with 20 homers and a bad OBP.
Yeah, that's fair. Hunter Green has an estimated return date of August 20th. He's been out since mid-June with a right hip issue. His teammate Nick Lodolo threw a side session Friday and is now targeting a return in late August instead of September. He's 59% rostered, and the time to stash Nick Lodolo is now if you have an IL spot available. Kyle Wright threw a bullpen session Friday, but all signs seem to indicate he won't be back with the Braves until September at the earliest. Hyunjin Ryu will make his debut Tuesday against the Orioles. The Blue Jays are apparently expected to go with a 6-man rotation due to a long stretch with no days off coming up. So Hyunjin Ryu, 25% rostered. Chris, any interest in Ryu?
I can't say I have too much interest there now.
All right. John
Kikuchi is no longer a 2-star pitcher for next week because of this, FYI.
That is good to know. John Means could begin a rehab assignment in early August. He suffered a back injury in late May while rehabbing from Tommy John surgery, which he had last year. Sounds like he should be back by September, barring any setbacks on John Means. Lamont Wade has missed 3 straight due to back tightness, and the Brewers will reinstate Wade Miley to have him start Wednesday against the Nationals. A couple names that went to the IL this weekend. We mentioned what happened with Taylor Ward. Hope everything's all right. Obviously, expected to miss the rest of the season. Anthony DeSclafani had a right elbow flexor strain. Alex Kirilloff with a right shoulder strain. Julio Teheran with a right hip impingement. Evan Longoria with a strained lower back. Nick Prado with a left groin strain. And Tommy Henry with left elbow inflammation. Let's take our final break. When we return, I've got some waiver wire hitters and a bunch of leftovers. We'll do it right after this.
Wake up to football highlights and news from around the world with the one and only Morning Footy team.
Rise and shine, football fans. Welcome to Morning Footy.
Start your all-day football craze with Morning Footy, part of the all-new Golazo Network.
Welcome back, and a big shout-out to everyone watching us live. Our Sunday episodes here, they do quite well. I think, people are trying to get information after all the trades and everything. 460 people here. We do appreciate you. Hit that like button and subscribe on YouTube if you haven't already. Let's talk some waiver wire hitters here. I've got 2 potential middle infield options. Tim Anderson, he's off the schneid. He went 3 for 5 with his first home run of the season on Saturday. Is hitting much better so far in the second half, batting .344 with that 1 homer, 1 steal, and an .829 OPS. Brandon Lau is on fire. Went 2 for 3 with a sock and a shoe on Friday, and then he went 3 for 5 with another home run on Sunday, also hitting much better here in the second half. Chris, if you can only choose one, you going Tim Anderson or Brandon Lau?
Brandon Lau. I think, Anderson, since the All-Star break, is hitting .344, which is awesome. Problem is 5 walks, so OBP is pretty good because he's hitting .344. 1 home run, 1 stolen base. And yeah, that's not really going to work, right? Like this is a guy who, if he's himself, should be a good source of batting average, maybe one of the best sources of batting average. But what's always helped him is, the 2020 pace that you hope he stays on. And he hasn't been anywhere close to that this year. So I'll go with Brandon Lau, who I believe when he's healthy, he's one of, if not the best power sources at that position.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to think Brandon Lau isn't just Brandon Lau right now. He's certainly looked that way since coming off the IL. All 3 of his hits here on Sunday were hit over 106 miles per hour.
The question is just, is he going to play against lefties? He hasn't all year, basically. And, when he came back off the IL, they basically explicitly said he's probably not going to play every day. So I do think that will limit the upside, but in relative to Tim Anderson, I would rather have him.
His normal platoon partner, Taylor Walls, is injured now. They haven't faced a lefty since that happened.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But, Brandon Lau, very hot right now in the second half, batting .288 with 4 homers, 1 steal, and a .950 OPS. 2 outfielders you might want to look at for this upcoming week. Lars Nootbaar, he's getting hot. 2 for 4 with a double dong on Friday. And then so far in the month of July, Nootbaar batting .309, 6 homers, 2 steals, a .980 OPS, one of Scott's sleeper hitters for this week.
Number 1.
Marcell Ozuna looks like he could be getting going as well. He had 4 home runs this weekend, including a double dong on Saturday. And overall this year, he's batting .236 with 22 home runs. Scott, who would you rather have moving forward, Lars Nootbaar or Marcell Ozuna?
That's a tough question. Before the weekend, I would have said Nootbaar, but Ozuna, I think, has the potential to make a higher impact if he can stay hot. So remember, he was terrible in April and then amazing for a 2-month stretch.
Yeah.
Prior to this 4-homer series against the Brewers, he had hit 147 in 20 games. So he's run very hot and cold this year.
Yes.
But he's on the right side of it now. So I unless it's specifically a points league where
I was going to say that this might be an opportunity for the cowards answer.
Yeah, Nootbaar and points, Ozuna and Roto.
Fair enough. A couple names here in deeper league. Zach Geloff enjoyed his time in Coors Field this weekend. He hit a home run on Friday and then went 2 for 6 with a home run and 2 steals on Saturday. Zach Geloff only batting .222, but showing off some power and speed so far. John Birdie has started 7 straight games for the Marlins, and so far in the second half, he's batting .472 with 3 stolen bases. Dominic Canzone with the Arizona Diamondbacks had 3 straight multi-hit games from Wednesday to Saturday. He was crushing it in the minors this season. I just don't know if he's going to play every day. For what it's worth, the Diamondbacks play 7 games this week, only 1 lefty on the schedule, so that should work out well for Dominic Canzone. And it was a big weekend for Kyle Isbell, who went 1 for 4 with a sock and a shoe on Friday, and then had a 4-hit game on Saturday. Chris, any interest here? Deeper leagues, 14, 15-team leagues or deeper. Zach Geloff, John Birdie, Dominic Canzone, and Kyle Isbell.
Yeah, I'm not sure Zach Geloff is just a deeper league guy. Given prospect pedigree, minor league production, the batting average is probably going to continue to be a problem because there's some swing and miss there. But I think there's legitimate power and speed there, and not really any playing time concerns. So yeah, I think Zach Geloff, 24% rostered is too low. The rest of these guys don't have much interest in. I would imagine Birdie, the Marlins seem likely to make a trade, and I would guess he'll lose playing time as a result of that. So no, I don't think so.
I was watching Jesus Luzardo start on Sunday, and John Birdie was playing shortstop. He made an absolutely terrible defensive play.
I don't know what the numbers are this year, but I feel like the shortstop position has been a real problem for the Marlins defensively. And
yeah,
but they have so many of them.
Yeah, they're all second basemen.
That's the problem. Let's get into some leftovers from the weekend. We did have a pitcher's duel on Friday.
It's time to duel
between Garrett Cole and Grayson Rodriguez. Nice little pitching performance from both of them. Garrett Cole went 7 shutout innings with 5 strikeouts in that one. And on the other side, Grayson Rodriguez, 6 1/3 shutout innings, 3 hits, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts. with 12 swinging strikes on 97 pitches. And in 3 starts since returning, obviously very small sample size, G-Rod 3.18 ERA and a 1.12 whip. He's still only 74% rostered. That seems kind of low for Grayson Rodriguez. Scott, any thoughts here on Garrett Cole versus Grayson?
Yeah, I think it's pretty clear Grayson Rodriguez is a different pitcher since returning. I'm buying into that. He was so dominant in AAA, and we hadn't seen that since June of 2022, because when he came back from the lat injury, he didn't look dominant in the minors. So I think he righted himself. That doesn't mean he's a must-start pitcher yet. Doesn't mean he's the must-start pitcher he's eventually going to be. He still has the usual issues that young pitchers have, not going deep enough into games, struggling to put hitters away with strike 3, even though he's good at getting whiffs in general. But he's trending the right direction, and very excited about Grayson Rodriguez's future again.
Would you drop Tyler Wells and/or Luis Severino for Grayson Rodriguez?
Yeah, I'd drop either one.
I'd drop both, yeah.
I think so too. Pitching standouts, part 1. Zach Wheeler turned in his 3rd double-digit strikeout start of the season. He was at the Pirates this weekend, 6 2/3 innings, 1 run, 11 strikeouts. In that one, Kevin Gausman turned in a strong start at home against the Angels, 6 innings, 1 run, 9 strikeouts with 19 swinging strikes. And Luis Castillo had a strong start at the Diamondbacks on Sunday, apparently the anniversary of him being traded last year. So shout out to Luis Castillo. 6 shutout innings with 7 strikeouts in that one. Chris, anything to add here on Castillo, Gausman, and Zach Wheeler?
Do you guys know who leads the majors in FIP right now?
I will say that of these 3 pitchers, it is
Zach one of them, right?
Zach Wheeler.
Zach Wheeler leads the majors in FIP. Kevin Gausman is 2nd. Luis Castillo is like 29th. Bum. I don't actually think Zach Wheeler is the best pitcher in baseball, obviously, but he seems to have had some bad luck this season. But he's got, is that a career high strikeout rate?
If it's not, it's very close to it, because his numbers look eerily similar to 2 years ago when he broke out.
Career high K per 9, slightly worse K percentage. There's a sign there of the distinction between those, because his BABIP is higher, his walks are actually a little lower, but he's facing more hitters per inning, hence more opportunities for Ks per inning. He's really good. I've remained unworried about him for most of the season.
Is the BABIP higher? Like, could it be a shift thing? Isn't he normally a ground ball pitcher?
That could be an explanation. He's not a ground ball pitcher this year.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, it's down to, his ground ball rate's down to 39%, by far the lowest of his career.
Low for a ground ball rate. Yeah.
And trending that way. It was 46% last year, 50% the year before. So that's been a multi-year trend for Zach Wheeler, which could help explain why he's struggled to live up to the FIP, except you would think that fewer ground balls would lead to a lower BABIP.
Lower BABIP, yeah.
So I mostly think the explanation there is just bad luck.
Pitching standouts, part 2. Joe Musgrove, another strong start up against the Rangers. He went 6 shutout innings with 5 strikeouts there. Kenta Maeda's velocity was up considerably on Sunday at the Royals. He threw 5 innings, 2 runs, 7 strikeouts, but the fastball was up 2 miles per hour. The splitter up 1.3 miles per hour. I think very encouraging for Kenta Maeda. And Aaron Savali just continues to get it done. 6 shutout innings with 4 strikeouts at the White Sox. Scott, anything on this group? Musgrove, Maeda, and Savali.
I didn't take the time to calculate what Kenta Maeda's numbers would be if you take out that 10 earned run start before he went on the IL.
Probably pretty good.
As good as that 2020 season where he was the Cy Young runner-up. So, yeah, I remain excited about him. Savali continues to get it done. Less confident in that, but the fact is velocity was back up a bit after being way down the last 2 starts. Didn't impact the results, but it had been way down. And
man, if anybody's willing to give me anything for Aaron Savali, I'd be looking to move him. I have no faith in it.
I do consider him part of the glob. I'd be more likely to start Aaron Savali than going back to the waiver wire pitchers, the highest end of the waiver wire pitchers, Braxton Garrett, who I ranked first of that whole group we talked about. I'd be more willing to start Savali than Garrett right now, but that doesn't mean I hold him in high esteem or wouldn't trade him necessarily if a decent offer came along.
Starters sit these two pitchers who both bounced back, had some good starts this weekend. Positive signs for Christian Javier, who was up against the Tampa Bay Rays. He allowed 3 runs over 6 innings. He had 9 strikeouts with a season-high 22 swinging strikes, 17 of those coming on the fastball. Worth pointing out, the Tampa Bay Rays have struggled big time offensively in the month of July, but a great start here for Javier. Chris, I know you wanted to highlight him. What do you think about the start, and are you starting Javier against the Guardians this week?
Yeah, so I'm looking at Lance Brosdowski. He does the great pitch breakdowns, and he was Christian Javier was someone that he identified pretty early on as having taken a pretty big step back in terms of his stuff, but velocity was up a little bit, and the vertical movement on the fastball looked more like it did earlier in the season and last year. So the various stuff metrics all suggest that this was the best Christian Javier's looked in a long time. And I think that's a very good sign because, this was a situation. I think his arm was dropping and it was changing. He was getting more cut on the fastball, not as much rise. So that's a good sign that he seems to have at least temporarily turned things around. That's, obviously doesn't mean he'll continue to do it moving forward, but it seemed like the issues for Javier were mechanical, and there's at least some sign that he figured that out.
But so, yeah, there's no guarantee that he'll continue to do this. There was no guarantee that he would continue to struggle in the ways he had before. And I find this, I expressed the need for patience with Christian Javier. And there were a lot of analysts pointing out, the movement on his pitches is off. And, obviously he was getting a lot fewer swinging strikes in addition to strikeouts for a 2-month stretch there.
Mm-hmm.
And those were all concerning signs, but it's also like, look what he was doing before that. Look what he did his entire career up to this point. Do pitchers never go through stretches where things are just a little off? And then normally if it's a pitcher with that kind of track record, unless he just, I don't know. It's part of what makes analyzing pitching difficult is that we can point to signs why they're struggling, but that doesn't mean they're going to continue to struggle. And that's what I felt. That's how I felt it was going to play out with Javier. And it doesn't mean it's necessarily, he's fixed and he'll never struggle again. But this is what I thought would eventually happen is hopefully he goes on a run like this.
I don't think it's just pitchers. I think that this is something that we can talk about just as a fallout of the StatCast era, I guess is what I would say, which is we have all these granular, minute details about arm slot and this guy's getting 3 inches of vertical movement, but last year he was getting 4.5 inches of vertical movement. And that's not to say that stuff doesn't matter. It does, clearly. As we're talking about with Christian Javier, we're seeing a change. But one thing that I think we need to remember when we talk about StatCast is we talk about StatCast and these types of granular things as if they are true measures of talent. And that's the idea, right? Is that if a guy throws 98, he throws 98. If a guy gets this much sweep on his slider, he gets this much sweep on his slider. Talent fluctuates, and guys go through stretches where they're not throwing as hard, where their mechanics are a little off. And that's something to keep in mind is yes, Christian Javier deserved to pitch as poorly as he did for the 2-month stretch that we're talking about. It doesn't mean he's fated to pitch that poorly forever. That's one thing to keep in mind when we talk about these things is they are snapshots in time, not predictions moving forward.
Just like numbers regress to the mean, talent often regresses to the mean. That doesn't mean nobody ever declines and gets worse, but you don't try not to live in the moment entirely.
One other pitcher to mention here, Scott, I know you wanted to talk about Bailey Ober, who had his worst start of the season at the Kansas City Royals, of all places. 4 innings, 11 hits, 6 earned runs. What do you see in this start, and would you start him this week up against the Diamondbacks, who have the 5th highest WOBA against right-handed pitching?
I'd lean against it, given the way this start went against the Royals. And it's more a warning that Bailey Ober might be the most obvious innings concerned guy apart from Yuri Perez. He was the one who when I wrote that article, 15 pitchers with innings concerns. Ober, he's already beyond his career high in innings, and he's been that way for a while. So is he going to hold up the rest of the season? The Twins, they're trying to lock up the AL Central. Presumably they want his arm available in the playoffs. Are they going to have to do something to manage his innings going forward? He had been as reliable as any pitcher in fantasy up until this start, a streak of 7 straight quality starts prior to this bad outing at the Royals. But we're entering that time of year where pitchers begin to wear down, and particularly if they're in uncharted waters innings-wise. That might help explain why Jesus Luzardo's start was so bad today, coming off arguably his best start of the season. He's already surpassed his career high in innings.
And through 115 pitches his previous start too.
Yeah, that can't help. So I'd be, we were talking about Luzardo as a sell high candidate coming off that, what was it, a 13 strikeout effort, 14 strikeout effort prior to this one. And doesn't mean you've missed your window now that he's had a bad start, but I think for both him and Ober, it's something to think about. Not that you need to panic and dump them for less than they're worth, but if you can trade them for the value they've accumulated to this point, you might save yourself a headache over the last 2 months.
Let's slide over to the call to the bullpen. Some updates here, and we'll start with the Cubs. On Friday, Adbert Alzolay recorded the final 4 outs for his 12th save. Many thanks to a home run robbery by Mike Tauchman. It was pretty clutch.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Awesome stuff. Alzolay, 51% rostered if you do need saves. For the A's on Friday, Trevor May walked 1 but picked up his 10th save. He is 14% rostered, much more widely available for those in deeper leagues. For the Diamondbacks on Saturday, Kevin Ginkel entered in the 8th inning with the game tied at the time. He struck out the side. The D-backs then took the lead. Ginkel started the 9th. He got the first out and then was relieved by Andrew Chafin, who gave up a triple and a walk. And then Scott McGough got the final out for his 8th save. Are we any closer to knowing anything about the Diamondbacks bullpen? I want to say that Ginkel is at the top of the list, but I don't know.
I will let you know Tuesday at 6:01 p.m.
There you go. That's probably the right answer. For the Marlins on Sunday, AJ Puck entered in the 7th inning with a 1-run lead. He gave up 2 runs. Tanner Scott pitched in the 8th inning, and then David Robertson got the 9th and picked up his 15th save and first with the Marlins. Chris is at the end of the road for AJ Puck. Are you okay dropping him?
Yeah, I think he's droppable.
Yeah, I think so too. For the Royals on Sunday, Scott Barlow was unavailable. Carlos Hernandez picked up his first save, and if the Royals do trade Scott Barlow away, it looks like it would be Carlos Hernandez as the next man up.
He's kind of interesting.
I know he throws super hard.
Yeah. He was one, I think he pitched for Nicaragua in the World Baseball Classic. Looked really good. He's got a very good, I think, changeup.
For the Rockies on Sunday, they had a 2-run lead. Daniel Bard pitched in the 8th inning, and Justin Lawrence pitched a clean 9th for his 8th save of the season. So I did not write down the names for to stream or not to stream. So guess what? We are doing it old school style. I'm just going to run through the names, and you guys let me know. Edward Cabrera at home against the Phillies on Monday.
I'm starting him in one league as a 2-star pitcher, and I benched him in another for I can't remember who. It might have been Jose Quintana in a points league. I just feel a little more confident in the length there, but it wouldn't shock me if Cabrera had 2 good starts this week. He's super talented.
How about Domingo Germán at home against Tampa Bay? They are struggling.
I mean, I'd rather not, but that's the difficulty in doing it this way is I don't know who to compare it to.
Well, we've got JP France at home against the Guardians.
That sounds better.
Yeah, that's fine.
We have Seth Lugo in Coors Field.
He's so curveball dependent that I just don't know how he's gonna react to Coors Field. So I'd steer clear.
Nick Pivetta will actually start, it seems like, on Monday, not be a bulk reliever. He's at the Mariners. That seems pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking to make up ground in strikeouts, it might be a heady play, but it's hard to get excited about this guy.
I mean, it's Nick Pivetta. Like, maybe something has dramatically changed, but we know he's capable of stretches like what we've seen. There's also a difference between throwing 5 innings when you're facing the heart of the order twice to get through 5 innings versus what he was doing out of the bullpen.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and say, I think JP France is at the top of the list, and then maybe Edward Cabrera and Seth Lugo?
Either Cabrera or Herman for me. Okay. I don't feel super confident in either.
All right. On Tuesday, we have Ranger Suarez at the Marlins.
I'm fine with that.
Why would? Oh, we usually go 2 days. All right. So yes. Go ahead. Sorry.
Josiah Gray at home against the Brewers.
That could go okay.
How about Matt Manning at the Pirates?
No.
I'd steer clear of both Manning and Oviedo. I know they've both had decent starts lately, but no.
Hyunjin Ryu in his debut against the Orioles.
No. I'll watch it, but can't start him.
Okay. How about Ben Lively at the Cubs?
Nah.
No.
Gavin Williams at the Astros?
I don't think so.
Probably not.
Jose Quintana at the Royals?
Yep.
Yeah, that's fine.
And yeah, that's pretty much it. So who do we like? Ranger Suarez and Jose Quintana?
Yep.
And maybe Josiah Gray? I think those.
Yep.
I'd be more willing to roll the dice on Johan Oviedo than Chris is. I have him as one of my 10 sleeper pitchers for this week. Granted, that's for 2 starts, 2 good matchups, as opposed to just the 1 day by itself. But, if you need to stream a pitcher, I think you could do worse than him against the Tigers.
All right, we're going to wrap there. For Scott, and Chris, I am Frank. I almost forgot to include you, Chris. I apologize. Thanks, as always, for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify if you actually enjoy the podcast. And we'll be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.